episode of Surviving the Survivor, we bring you the best guests in all of true crime. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button. Here's your host, Emmy Award-winning broadcaster, Joel Waldman.
What's up, STS Nation? Welcome to Surviving the Survivor. It is the show that brings you the very best guests in all of true crime on trending criminal cases. And of all the cases we cover, perhaps this has been trending the longest since 1989, to be precise. And tonight on the show, we have got the reporter who's been covering it since the day after the now infamous Menendez brothers. Before we get there, it is a national holiday at STS. Today is our fearless booking producer, the man who books best guests, none other than Steve Cohen, Meave Moen. It is his birthday today. Happy birthday to Steve-O, who's with his parents and his family, enjoying his birthday, I hope. Again, here at STS, it is a national holiday. We will take out time tonight, and I will even give my pups a piece of the birthday cake to celebrate in honor of Steve-O. And the thing I like best about it is that he's a few months older than me, and that will never change. There is actually a stunning new twist and development in the Menendez case, as if there haven't been enough already. And that is the family, the Menendez brothers and their family, want DA Nathan Hochman removed from the case. As you'll recall, he's held a number of press conferences and there have been some hearings. And during those, he has, according to the family, re-traumatized them by showing graphic crime scene photos. So we are going to talk about all that. I'm going to bring in Robert Rand in just a moment. Before I do, coming up in about 5 to 10 minutes, you are going to meet one of the Menendez brothers' friend from prison. He is out now. His name is Honore Brown. He is a rap artist. He got to know the brothers, both Lyle and Erik, in two separate prisons quite well, and basically credits them for his early release from prison and also for his ability to turn his life around. So we're going to take a human look inside the Menendez brothers case. I know it's polarizing, and some people say, leave him there to rot. Robert Rand is not one of those guys. He feels that they have served their time. Robert Rand is here. It says guilty behind him, but there's Robert Rand is, he's not guilty at all. He is innocent of being an awesome reporter and covering this trial from the very get-go. So, and he has the book, obviously. The Menendez Murders is the book, and you have the documentary. There it is. The Menendez Murders is the book. Yeah, the definitive book. And then you've got Menendez and Menudo, Boys Betrayed. But Robert, to you, let's start off here. The calls now are growing louder, at least from the family and Lyle and Erik, to remove DA Nathan Hochman. I mean, this seems to be a bit of an unprecedented move, but this whole case has been unprecedented since the get-go. What do you make of this?
I think it's another smart move by defense attorneys Mark Geragos and Cliff Gardner. DA Nathan Hochman, the DA of LA County, has just exposed really his prejudice a number of times. The biggest example is that a woman named Kathy Katie, who used to be a deputy DA, and she ended up being the attorney representing Milton Anderson, the only family member who was opposed to letting Erik and Lyle Menendez out of prison 35 years after their release. In other words, every other member of the family wanted to see the brothers released. They've been in for 35 years. And so Milton Anderson passed away in February. And now Kathy Katie has been appointed by Nathan Hochman to be the head of victims services, which is a really bizarre development, because the victims in this case are really the other members of the Menendez and Anderson families that support the release of Erik and Lyle Menendez.
Yeah.
And
So is Kathy is this is she doing this for the entire DA's office? And just you broke up on my end a little bit. So she was the only one to represent the only family member against the release. Is that what you're saying?
that's correct. Kathy Katie is a former deputy DA. She supported Nathan Hochman in his campaign last fall when he was running for LA County DA against George Gascon. And she was a private attorney representing Milton Anderson, who passed away in February. Milton Anderson was 91. He was the only family member opposed to the release of Erik and Lyle Menendez. There are two
And
dozen.
and he
Other,
was what was his was he Kitty's brother? Is that who he was?
yes, Milton Anderson was the one of Kitty Menendez's two brothers. The other brother, Brian Anderson, died in 2017. And both Milton and Brian Anderson testified for the prosecution in the penalty phase of the second Menendez trial. In other words, they wanted to see their nephews put to death.
By the way, there's T. Cancel, and I'll open it up. And if you're just joining us, you're going to meet shortly, I hope, Honore Brown, who served time with both Lyle and Erik in two different prisons and credits them for his early release. Let Us Pray here says, I'm with Milton, meaning she's against the release of the boys, or he. I'm not sure what lettuce is, sort of gender neutral. T. Cancella here. Whatever happened to the therapist Erik saw, who violated confidentiality? I know he had his license, I think, revoked or, taken away. Yeah.
So actually, the therapist you're talking about is Dr. William Vickery, who is a very noted forensic psychiatrist. Dr. Vickery retired in 2019, and so he did not have his license revoked. He admitted when he was literally caught on the witness stand by Deputy DA David Kahn, the lead DA in the second Menendez trial, that he had changed some of his therapy notes with Erik Menendez because Leslie Abramson, according to Dr. Vickery, had asked him to change these notes. She had told him, these different sections I want you to take out have nothing to do with really the case. And so the way it actually developed was that Dr. Vickery was on the witness stand in the second trial, and he was working off one set of notes, and Deputy DA David Kahn had Dr. Vickery's original therapy notes. And so they realized at the same time, live in court, that Dr. Vickery had changed his notes. He was investigated by the California Medical Board, and they did not revoke his license. However, one postscript, Leslie Abramson actually ended up taking the Fifth Amendment for several days, saying that she didn't want to answer any questions about this controversy. And then she later withdrew her taking of the Fifth. And the final closing argument in the penalty phase was actually delivered by her co-counsel, Barry Levin, a former LAPD officer.
Yeah. For those who don't know, Leslie Abramson was a very charismatic criminal defense attorney that represented the brothers back in the day. What is she up to now, Robert? She's got to be well into her 70s, I assume.
Well, Leslie Abramson, I think, is in her early 80s, and she is now retired herself.
Yeah, and the therapist we're talking about is Dr. Oziel, right? Because I think
no, the therapy notes that were an issue at the second trial were notes taken by Dr. William Vickery. Dr. Vickery was the lead defense therapy expert. Dr. Jerome Oziel was the therapist that Erik Menendez confessed to on Halloween in 1989. And Dr. Oziel voluntarily turned in his license at the end of the first Menendez trial because there was some controversy about him, unrelated to the Menendez brothers, but connected to other patients he had in his therapy practice.
I'm not sure how to pronounce this. Benjamin Danklin. Shout out to the homie X-Rated. That is Honore, I believe, who's supposed to join us momentarily. He's got a rap career in the Midwest, I believe Kansas City. So, and welcome to Emma. Love seeing the new names and new faces, and welcome to one and all. So, Robert, I don't need to tell you this, but obviously Mark Garagos is pretty media savvy. Is there a there here with this whole removal of Nathan Hochman, or is he just playing to the media in Los Angeles with this plea? In other words, does Mark Garagos himself think there's a legitimate shot that somehow Nathan Hochman could be pushed aside and have someone else sort of in charge of at least this case in Los Angeles?
Well, the defense attorneys, Mark Garagos and Cliff Gardner, actually believe they have a chance to remove Nathan Hochman and replace him with the state attorney general of California, Rob Bonta, to take over this case as the prosecutor. They filed a 160-page motion explaining all the reasons that they believe this should happen, and they think they actually have a chance.
Yeah. Emma, thank you so much. Getting a super sticker from her. T. Cancelo letting us know Dr. Oziel voluntarily surrendered his license. I've asked you this before, Robert, but there's people in here who are just outright saying, look, there are, poor people of less fame, who are in the prison system who either deserve to be out more or equally to the Menendez brothers, and they're simply being overlooked. So what kind of factor did your documentary have? What kind of factor does the series, although it's a real, I guess, a drama series on Netflix, what kind of impact did it have on what's happening right now?
So I want to just mention that I'm grateful for the Ryan Murphy series, Monsters, the Lyle and Erik Menendez story that came out on Netflix last fall. It was a 9-episode scripted series, very loosely based on the facts of the real case. And then a few weeks later, Netflix released a Menendez documentary, which I was interviewed in. And a lot of people saw both those shows. So I'm grateful that all the Netflix subscribers are aware of this case. But what really makes an impact on a case and what could get Erik and Lyle Menendez out of jail is new evidence. And that's what we revealed in the Peacock documentary 2 years ago this week. Menendez plus Menudo, Boys Betrayed. And in that documentary, it featured the primary character, a former Menudo member, Roy Rosello, who said that Jose Menendez had raped him when he was 14 years old. And there we have a new victim who has come forward who has no connection to Erik and Lyle Menendez. And also there's a second piece of new evidence, which I discovered visiting the home of Marta Cano, the sister of Jose Menendez, in the spring of 2018. And that was a letter that Erik Menendez wrote to his cousin, Marta's son, Andy Cano, in late 1988. And in that letter, which is now part of a habeas corpus petition that the defense filed, Erik Menendez complains about the ongoing sexual abuse by his father that was still going on when he was 17 years old.
Yeah. By the way, did you have a chance? I know you were going to reach out, and I know you speak to them often, but since this sort of continuation of the resentencing hearing, we'll get into what's next. Have you talked to the brothers, and what was their reaction?
I have talked to the brothers briefly. They're very busy actually in prison. They have the Green Space Project, in which they're painting a huge mural on the interior of their prison wall and also planting a garden that is a beautiful new space I've seen, which they're both working on. Erik Menendez is the lead painter. They are also both teaching classes. Erik Menendez teaches a class about alternatives to violence, and he also created a hospice program, which he's involved with. And both brothers are also enrolled at classes through UC Irvine, through the prison, where they Zoom with the professors from R.J. Donovan Prison near San Diego. So their days are actually pretty full.
Wow.
But,
And the classes that they take, are those with other students, or is that simply set up like as an inmate program?
There are other inmates in their classes, in their college classes.
Okay.
And this is a program that was set up through UC Irvine in Orange County, just south of LA. And the professors teach the classes by Zoom to the inmates at R.J. Donovan Prison.
Wow. From Ashley here, Vestal. Robert, please mention that we have the Youthful Offenders Act in California, which is a change. Explain what that is and if it impacts this case at all.
The Youthful Offenders Act was passed in California about 10 years ago. And under that law, anybody who was under the age of 26 at the time they committed their crime is eligible to have their case reviewed. And so that was what led to the release of Honore Brown, who will be joining us shortly. And that is a foundation of the Menendez brothers' fight for resentencing of their case. They were 18 and 21 at the time of the crime. New medical science has determined that your brain is not fully developed until the age of 26. And so, therefore, they are relying on that as a possible foundation for their resentencing. But I want people to remember there are two other paths to freedom for Erik and Lyle Menendez. And those are, there's a habeas corpus petition that was filed the day after our documentary, Menendez plus Menudo, Boys Betrayed, came out on Peacock. And in the habeas petition, that deals with the new evidence, and also that deals with the crime. The resentencing motion only deals with their record in prison, in state prison in California, and whether or not they've become rehabilitated. And then the third path to freedom for the brothers is clemency, which could be granted at any time by Governor Gavin Newsom of California. And Governor Newsom, in late February, ordered that a risk assessment be done to determine if Erik and Lyle Menendez would be a danger to the people of California if they are let out.
Yeah. And Robert, I mean, on that point, we don't get political at STS, but I got to ask you, is it a political liability, in your opinion, for Gavin Newsom to offer the brothers this clemency option? Is that a problem for him politically, or is it the other way, that if he doesn't, it's a problem? Is he kind of caught between a rock and a hard place?
That's a great question, Joel. So we can go back to the case of Leslie Van Houten, who was a member of the Manson family. And she was approved for parole a number of times by the California Parole Board. She was a member of the Manson family and on drugs when she was 20 years old. She was trying to be released from prison when she was in her 70s. She had a pristine record in prison. And yet Governor Jerry Brown and then Governor Gavin Newsom both turned her down to be released. And so what Leslie Van Houten did was she appealed to the parole board. She appealed the release, and she was released several years ago, in spite of the Gavin Newsom being opposed to her release. I think the Manson case is certainly more controversial than the Menendez case. And so but I think Gavin Newsom is a political animal. It's likely, it's been talked about that he will run for president in the next election. And I think that he has, talked this through with all his advisors. And I hope that he supports the release of Erik and Lyle. And Newsom has scheduled for them to appear before the California Parole Board June 13th coming up. And so I think these are all indicators, the risk assessment and the parole board hearing are signs that Gavin Newsom may be sympathetic to the release of Erik and Lyle Menendez after 35 years of incarceration. I mean, we really have to answer the question, what is the purpose of prison? Are we trying to just lock people up and throw away the key and never allow them to be rehabilitated? Or have Erik and Lyle Menendez been punished enough serving 35 years in prison?
Yeah. These are all good points and all controversial. And I know, you don't shy away because a lot of people come at you saying, hey, they don't deserve to get out. You think that they do. So just back to this resentencing hearing. And for those who are just joining, we're waiting for the Menendez brothers' friend, Honore Brown, to join us. He was in prison, I believe, for murder as well. He's going to tell us his story. And he's friends with both Lyle and Erik and credits them for turning his own life around. He actually credits the Menendez brothers. But so the resentencing hearing basically amounted to a bit of a circus, and the judge didn't have the risk assessment sent to him or other information that he needed. So there's another hearing, I believe, set for May 9th. You talked about a June one. Let's take them one at a time. Am I right? Is there a May 9th hearing coming up?
So, yes, there is a hearing scheduled for May 9th in front of Judge Michael Jessic in Superior Court in Van Nuys. And that will not be a very long hearing. It will really deal with scheduling. And I believe that a majority of that hearing could be in camera without the public or the media in the courtroom. And so that May 9th hearing is not a major event. Nothing will happen that day. The next major event will be when the brothers appear before the California Parole Board on June 13th. And I want to say one thing to people that are really stuck on what the mainstream media log line of the case was in the 1990s. And that was that Erik and Lyle were a pair of greedy rich kids who killed Ozzie and Harriet on a Sunday night in Beverly Hills. And if you still believe that, I urge you to read my book and learn the facts of this case, because the greedy rich kid story, belongs long ago in the 90s. And that was never the real story.
Yeah. So, Robert, I mean, just to touch on that, because you do always hear the line, well, the minute the parents were dead, they were out buying multiple Rolex watches. That's a line you always hear everybody say. What did your reporting sort of flesh out? What did you find out? Why were they spending the parents' money in the days after these murders? Was it some kind of, I don't know, reaction to, the trauma that they experienced, and this was a way that they were kind of letting it all out? Was it cathartic for them? I have no idea.
Well, several different things I want to mention. First of all, the Menendez family was a family that spent money freely. They were an upper class, wealthy family. The entire family, including the sons, Erik and Lyle, had always spent money quite freely. And so one other thing that's important to know is that in August of 92, about a year before the first trial, the LADA's office went to a grand jury and they tried to get a special circumstance of murder for financial gain. And the grand jury did not indict the brothers on those charges. And that didn't stop the prosecutors for a moment. they continued to push that greedy rich kid story because they knew the media loved it. And back in 1993, when Erik and Lyle went on trial for the first time, there was no internet, no social media, no 24-hour news cycle. So it was very difficult to fight back once the mainstream media had set the agenda for your case. And so it was difficult for them to counter that notion that they were greedy rich kids. And again, I think that, if you look at this family, they were wealthy. They had always spent money freely. And one other factoid to know is that Erik and Lyle Menendez actually never got their hands on the principal money from the estate, which was, the media was saying it was worth $14 million. The reality was it was only worth $6 million, which is still a lot of money. But what the brothers did receive was 5 weeks after the killing of Jose and Kitty Menendez, they were each given a check for $250,000 from a life insurance policy, which neither brother knew about, that had been sold to Jose Menendez by his sister, Marcano, in West Palm Beach. And so that was the money that Erik and Lyle Menendez spent in the fall of 1989. And what I say is, if you gave any kid $250,000 in cash, and they were 18 and 21, I would be surprised if they didn't go out, buy NASCAR or buy some clothes. It's just the way you would be at that age.
Well, they were definitely privileged. You ever try to figure out what the value of $6 million in late '89 was in today's money, roughly?
I should know that, but I don't.
I would say it's upwards of 20 million, be my guess. So Robert, a lot of people in the chat were around back then. A lot were not. Take us, this was the very, if not the earliest court TV trial, and also just the early days of CNN. This is pre Fox News Channel, pre MSNBC. What was it like? The first and second trial, how would you describe them? I think were you there for each day of both trials?
I was there for every day of each trial.
So kind of set the scene for us. What was it like?
So the first trial was covered gavel to gavel live on Court TV, and it was a circus. There were 12 of us that actually had reserved seats in the courtroom. And we've gotten those reserved seats by writing Judge Stanley Weisberg, the trial judge. And sitting next to me was Dominic Dunn, the famous writer from Vanity Fair. And 200 other reporters were watching a video feed in a block away from the courthouse. Every day, on lunch breaks and after court, the attorneys would speak to the media. And it was really wild. I mean, the not only was the trial carried gavel to gavel, but all the evidence hearings were also carried live on Court TV. And then at night, Court TV would do a 3-hour highlight show. And then after that, there was an early version of the internet that was known as bulletin boards, in which people could write text, and that was about it. And people would debate the evidence in the trial till late at night, early in the morning, and then they would be back on Court TV when court was in session at 9. So it was a really crazy time. I think the defense made what I consider to be a tactical error. They held back their cards until 2 weeks before the trial. So the case didn't go to trial for 3 years because there were issues with Dr. Jerome O'Seal and the tapes he had recorded of the brothers during therapy sessions. And those tapes would normally be privileged and not allowed in court. But that issue went all the way to the California Supreme Court, which ruled in the fall of '93 that some of the O'Seal tapes were admissible. And so the defense chose to not go public with what their defense was until 2 weeks before the first trial in July of 1993. And the reaction of the general public, who had only heard greedy rich kids, going on a spending spree, the reaction of the general public to the abuse defense, or what was called by Alan Dershowitz the abuse excuse, people were saying, well, why are we just hearing this for the first time? Why have we not heard anything about this over the past 3 years? And
Yeah.
so I think the public and also the juries, there were two juries, one for each brother, because some of the evidence only pertained to one or the other brother. And I think that everybody was surprised when the defense put on 58 witnesses, teachers, coaches, family, friends, a number of witnesses that told a very detailed story of life behind the walls of that Beverly Hills mansion. And the story was very different than what people had been told before, in 3 years before, in the media.
Let me ask you just a much broader question. We are just waiting, by the way. You're getting the definitive reporter on this case right now, but we are waiting for Honore Brown, who I am hoping will join us. He served time with Lyle and Erik in 2 separate prisons, and he credits them for his turnaround in life. He's working as a rap artist now, so far be it from me to question where the rap artist is.
By the way, his name is X-rated, his rapper name, and he's very popular.
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing. Who knew? But I'll check him out, and hopefully he'll be here shortly. So, but Robert, let me ask you a question. I mean, right now you've got this Karen Reed trial that is just, if you're on Twitter, you would think it's the only story in America right now. And then back then you had the Menendez brothers, you had OJ. What is it about certain cases that leave a mark on sort of the zeitgeist of the time? Why do you think the Menendez brothers resonated so much back then and even today?
Well, I think the obvious reason why so many people were following the Menendez brothers case was that it was broadcast live, gavel to gavel, on Court TV. And so people were really stuck on the trial. They were watching every day, all day, every day, like a novella or a soap opera, because it was inside the life of this family that supposedly had the American dream, living in the mansion in Beverly Hills. And yet this terrible tragedy took place. So I just got a text from Honore. He just made it home. He'll be here momentarily.
That's good news.
But I was saying, people were just so divided about whether Erik and Lyle Menendez were greedy rich kids or abuse victims. And I think the majority of the public thought they were greedy rich kids. And that's because that was the story they were being fed by the mainstream media.
Yeah. So I asked you if you had talked and gotten feedback from Lyle and Erik, and I understand that they are busy in prison, which is interesting. I'm glad that these inmates are kept busy and are doing good things, better than just sitting around watching the day waste away. But same point. I mean, have you spoken with the family? I know the cousin was very outspoken. I believe it's Anna Maria. The family seems to be equally, if not more, upset with what DA Nathan Hochman did. I know in one of the news conferences after the hearing, she said, look, this guy has re-traumatized our family multiple times in just the last couple of months. There was no need to show these graphic crime scene photos. I mean, these are victims of the crime, even though they're supporting the convicted killers here. But how is the family reacting a few weeks out since this resentencing hearing was now continued?
The family is still 100% behind Erik and Lyle Menendez, and they would like them to be released after 35 years of incarceration. The person who can really give you better answers about the family and about the brothers is Honore Brown, who will be here in moments. He just texted me, as I said. Honore talks to Erik and Lyle every day, I believe. And
Really?
some of the family members are in regular contact with them quite frequently. I do not talk to them that much. I do go and visit them every couple of months. I talk to them occasionally on the phone. When I go visit them in person, we never talk about the case. We just talk about life. When we talk on the phone, I ask them questions about the case. When you go to visit the brothers, you are not allowed to take a pen or pad or recorder or phone or anything in the prison. You're only allowed to take your car keys and $50 in $1 bills to buy the inmate you're visiting snacks from the machines.
Shout out, by the way, to Phantom 6000, who I don't see in the chat, but he is friendly with DA Nathan Hochman. He's a lawyer in LA. He has gone through a bit of a hard time. Phantom has himself, so thinking of him. But from Friday here, I'm just curious to get your reaction to this, Robert. DA Hochman presents as obsessed and even a bit unhinged. He rants and repeats. In this case, has consumed him. He does, go off, I guess, on what I would call tangents. Takes a while to, he kind of litigates everything. I mean, that's probably the lawyer in him. Is he, in your opinion, is he over the top when it comes to the Menendez brothers? Is he Captain Ahab-esque, a little monomaniacal here?
I think he is a little bit over the top. LA County has much bigger problems than a 35-year-old murder case. And so that's where I think, personally, as a resident of LA County and a taxpayer, that's where I would like my DA to address some of the major problems, like the homeless encampments, the smash and grab robbers, the looters after the fires. And I really don't understand why he is so focused on Erik and Lyle Menendez. It really doesn't make sense. And I don't get it.
Yeah. Without further ado, I think he is ready here. Honore, X-rated Brown. Welcome to the show. I know you don't know who I am, which is more than okay, but I'm Joel, host of the show, and pleasure to have you, X-rated.
Likewise, it's a pleasure to be here. Bob gave me a crash course very early this morning, so I know what I'm dealing with.
Yeah, do I call you Mr. X-rated, or do I call you Honore? What is it?
My mama named me Honore. I've been honoring that in my professional capacity. It's like The Rock. It's either Rock or it's either Dwayne Johnson, right? That's how I look at it. You can't go wrong, really. We all know he's The Rock.
Yeah. Well, listen, I grew up in the 80s. As a matter of fact, my community has heard this many times. Honore, I think if possible, yeah, COE, is that good? I don't know if you're on a cell phone, Honore, if you can turn it horizontally, that would help us. If not, no worries.
If I can turn it what?
Horizontally, so you're
okay.
Right now. Yeah, if you can just flip it side. Well, let's see if that works. I want that handsome face. There we go. Perfect.
Right.
Perfect. So I've told this story a million times, but before the Menendez brothers moved to Beverly Hills, they lived in New Jersey, my home state, and I used to play tennis with those guys. So I have a bit of a personal connection prior to you ever meeting them. This is probably mid to late 80s. But tell us a little bit about yourself. I've been talking to Robert now for a while, but it's going to now become the X-rated Honore Brown show. So tell us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, and what happened to you.
Well, I grew up in Sacramento, California, which was a hotbed for drugs and gang activity. And it's starting at about the mid 80s, what we call the Reagan era. The war on drugs, the war on crime, etc., did a number on our community, and it had a lot of ramifications. And a lot of us made some bad decisions. And one of those decisions for me was to join a gang. I also happen to have some talent as a rap artist. So I have one foot in the studio and I have one foot in the streets. Ended up getting a deal, having my debut album released on Priority Records when I was 17 years old, and had Rolling Stone declare my debut album as the most hardcore hip hop album of all time. I then ended up being arrested for participation in a gang retaliation, faced the death penalty, defeated that, was remanded to adult court, eventually convicted and given a sentence of 31 years to life. Had my music used against me in court, was the first hip hop artist to have that not so great distinction. And yeah, that's how I ended up incarcerated in prison. In retrospect, it's interesting. The felony murder rule is now illegal in the state of California because of the freedom of the lyrics AB that they put out. They can no longer use lyrics against you in a court of law, so that's no longer legal. No longer automatically remand a juvenile over to adult court. That's no longer legal. No longer place a juvenile in adult facility. That's no longer legal. So 95% of what I experienced in my conviction and ultimate incarceration is no longer legal in the state of California here 33 years later.
Yeah.
But
hey, by the way, you're smart. You got out of California. You're in the Midwest. So
I'm not that smart because I'm on my way back to California.
By the way, I got to tell you, your backdrop reminds me of, so I wrote a book. It's about my mother's a child Holocaust survivor, and we had to do the Audible version. So I was freaking out because I don't know studios. I didn't know where to go. And I hit up this one studio in Miami. Anyway, it turns out Kanye records his albums there, and it's called House of Hits. And I brought my 85-year-old mother in there, and all the hip hop artists were loving my mom, and she was hanging out. And she can actually, my mom can rap. So I might have you do some sort of debut album. If you know MC Search from Third Base, he did a whole freestyle rap about my mom. I'm going to send that to you after the show. Maybe we'll get you to do one as well. So
please do. Yes, Search is a legend. Search is a legend, and your mother is a GOAT. I looked her up, looked you up, and your mom was one of those things that stood out to me. I have a phenomenal mom, intellectually, spiritually, and so I put a high value on the mothers out there. Nevertheless, one who had to endure and survive the horrors of the Holocaust. Talk about some of the bravest people you could ever fathom of meeting. And so lucky you, man, to have come from such strength in your background.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that. So Robert, to you, I mean, is Honore, and we'll get to Lyle and Erik in a minute, is he a picture? You know, you hear the first line of his bio, former Crips gang member and a rapper, you know, who is in a gang-related murder. Right away, you know, I'm the Jewish kid from New Jersey. I'm like, oh, shit, this guy's scary. But then you meet Honore, and he's super down to earth, humble, smart. Is this what rehabilitation looks like to you, Robert?
Honore, Erik, and Lyle Menendez are all the poster guys for rehabilitation. When Honore was just out of Donovan prison in September 2018, Lyle Menendez called me and he said, "You have to go over and meet my brother, Honore Brown." And I did. And we hung out and, you know, really enjoyed getting to know him. I was actually at his first birthday party in LA as a free man in the summer of 2019. And he's really become an inspiration for me. And his own story is, you know, quite interesting. But he's right here. He is the guy who knows Erik Lyle Menendez very well.
Yeah. Robert, I'm going to keep you. Sometimes there's a weird audio glitch, and I definitely don't want that with a rap star on the show. So I'm going to keep you muted. I'll unmute you. but X-rated to you. So take us back in time. I think you met Lyle first. It was apparently during, I think, a game of chess. Tell me, before you knew them, I assume you knew of them in the prison system, because these guys are all, Lyle and Erik are pretty well known. So what did you know about them? And obviously you're a name too. Tell me about, right before you met them and then how you actually met them.
Well, while I was going through my trial, it was almost simultaneously while we were going to court. They were convicted before I was, and I was actually incarcerated during the time of the first trial. So I knew about the first trial. I knew about the defense that they had put on for that trial. And everybody kind of had an opinion in that environment. The county jails, a lot of people had opinions. I knew about what they called the abuse excuse at the time. They called it the abuse excuse. That's what we always heard. But I also saw them when they spoke in their interviews. I was very impacted by that Barbara Walters interview. I thought they spoke so well and about their experiences and what their concerns were. And after the second trial, once things, they refused to allow the abuse defense and the cameras. So at that point, by the time I got incarcerated and I was on my way to prison, I looked at it like they got railroaded. I thought, they made some mistakes, of course, but overall, I thought they got railroaded, which they did. You can be guilty of a crime and be railroaded. The justice system can go outside of the norms of what regular regular processes are, which we're seeing ironically with Hochman now, where things that aren't normal are occurring inside of the case, and you can have guys get railroaded. So I just felt like they were being railroaded at the time, separate from whether they committed the act versus the why, and if the abuse was legitimate, and the jury should have had an opportunity to hear that. But of course, for me, it was like viewing the OJ case, outsider looking in, and it was a curiosity, but you go on with your life. So I did that. I viewed it. I thought what I thought of it. It was another topic of conversation around the yard, and then I move on with my life. And then I end up on the same facility. Lyle arrived onto the facility that I was housed at, and so I watched his arrival. I don't think I'd ever been around another famous person that arrived at the institution who wasn't close to me. So I've been around other rappers, Sibo, fresh off of his appearance on Tupac's All Eyes on Me album, 10 million copy selling album. And he was my cellmate. I was so close to him. We both came from a gang background, same neighborhood. So I didn't really experience his fame as an outsider. But watching Lyle arrive, how it impacted the officers, the whispers, everybody talking about it, made me understand my impact when I arrived somewhere. I kind of wondered, is this what it's like when I'm not in the eye of the storm? Is this what that looks like? And so I had this respect for him as somebody who also had a storm of their own brewing in the media, and a big case and things that they had to deal with, and attention from the institution, the facility, for better and for worse, and hatred and an abundance of interest from the inmate population as well that you have to navigate. So there was this mutual respect between Lyle and I before we ever really spoke. But of course, I'm hanging out with the Crips. I'm doing pull-ups and dips, and we got our boom box. I got life. I'm never getting out. So at the time, I just do my push-ups, do my workout, figure out how I can smuggle a recorder into the institution to record a new song. I was full-blown criminal status at the time. Although in the back of my mind, I knew at that point, about nearly a decade in, that something had to give. So I had that sense, but I didn't what I call the fortitude. I didn't have the fortitude at the time, the courage to make the decision to do something about it. But I definitely had concerns about what is my life going to be? How do I create a life for myself? And so But I did it. I released an album, did very well, hit the Billboard charts. I had a story. The LA Times came to interview me, and then MTV came and set up cameras inside of our building in the day room. And normally that would be happening for Lyle Menendez. So he's watching that like, huh? And like, look at this kid.
Mm.
And so I got this big old chain on and a medallion and these big old diamond earrings. And, you know, I was a lot. I was a rapper. I was like a
They let you wear
stereotypical.
what you're talking pre-prison? They don't let you wear that in prison, right?
They don't let you wear that in prison. And I had so much influence that, you know, there wasn't a lot that anybody could have done to stop me, or, you know, so you're not supposed to have this stuff, but I had it anyway. And I could tell you a lot about my psychology at the time.
Uh-huh.
And here's, you know, I'm from Southside. I'm from an urban community. Here's this guy from, you know, grew up and lived in Princeton and Beverly Hills, and he's more humble than I was at the time, you know. Ironically, everybody says the arrogant, cocky thing about Lyle, and a part of my first conversation with him was him advising me to tone it down. And so he's playing chess against himself. He's studying the board at this table. He was always at that table in his downtime when he wasn't working out. He'd read the Wall Street Journal there. He'd have his cup and he'd play chess against himself and kind of practice to play against the, you know, there's a lot of really good chess players on the yard. Chess is a big thing. Mm-hmm. And the battle of the wits. And so he was practicing, and he says, hey, you know, can I talk to you for a second, man? And I sat down, it's Lyle Menendez, right? Mm-hmm. So I sit down, and he tells me that he thought I had so much potential, but that I wasn't utilizing my influence correctly. And that, you know, the big change and all of that stuff that you know, that just, if I focused and toned it down and set my mind toward what I wanted to do with my life, that he thought I could be so much more than just a rapper and a gang member, that I had so much more than that, so much more potential. And for whatever reason, man, that resonated with me. Like, I needed somebody to tell me that. You know, my father wasn't in my life. I was the apex predator of my circle, you know, and outside of Tookie Williams, I got a letter from Tookie Williams that probably a year before that, telling me a lot of the same things. And I had heard from Sanyuka Shakur, Monster Cody Scott, who wrote the book, The Autobiography of a Los Angeles Gang Member, the book Monster. And he really got on me. I wrote a song called Deadly Game about the 3 strikes and you're outlaw, inspired by Polly Klaas and her family. Wow. I felt like the government, the state of California had used, specifically Pete Wilson had used her death to convince voters to allow the 3 strikes law to go into effect under the pretense of preventing sexual predators from being released and child predators. And then turned around and used it to lock people up and give them 25 to life for stealing a slice of pizza or getting in a fist fight, or, you know, and disproportionately targeting minorities who are not the people that are majority likely to even be a child predator in that system. So I wrote a song about that, put it on an album by Sibo, my colleague. I wrote every word of that song, and we hit number 3 on the charts behind Brian McKnight and Mariah Carey. 1997. Wow. And that resulted in me hearing from Monster Sanyuka Shakur telling me that somebody with that kind of capability had a duty to say something that was meaningful. And so here's Lyle, you know, not long after that, telling me something very similar. And for whatever reason, man, I just believed it. I wanted to believe it. I wanted to believe something more of myself than I was just a gang member and a convicted killer. You know, what am I? You know, you really have this existential crisis as a life prisoner, and there's a choice to make. You know, you're going to be, I saw people lose their minds and just, they go down all the wrong roads. They use drugs, they self-medicate. And then you see the guys who go to school, who go self-help, and they just go the complete other direction and get themselves together, whether they're ever going home or not. And so I was in that area of trying to decide which one of those ways I was going to go. And I think Lyle kind of was that last pebble that tipped my scale. So I started attending self-help groups under his guidance and his mentorship. And yeah, that was the domino that tipped it for me, the beginning of the spark of hope that not even that I could go home, but that I could change my life, that there was another way to do my time. And then next thing I got transferred where Erik was.
The story's given me goosebumps, man. You're very inspirational, and I'm always very, I'm always encouraged when I see people who have changed their lives. My dad, who passed away, used to say, "Life changes on a dime," and it's all good choices and bad choices. And Honore made the right choice. But Robert, to you, that initial conversation when they're playing chess and Lyle, calls over Honore and tells him basically in so many words to tone it down, that could have gone badly for Lyle. What is it about Lyle, do you think? And I'm going to ask Honore this too, but I would think, if you're in prison, you got to be careful. You got a famous rap star who's sitting across from you. You might not want to say, hey, tone it down, lose some of the ego. But Lyle went ahead and said that. What do you think prompted that from Lyle? And why do you think it kind of triggered Honore into realizing he needed to change? Oh, and I got you muted. Hang on one sec. Go ahead, Bob.
I think that people really understand who Lyle and Erik Menendez are today in 2025. When I met them in October of 1989, 2 months after they killed their parents, 5 months before they were arrested, they were college-age kids, kind of shy, soft-spoken, and prison really became their college education. They have spent more than half their lives incarcerated. And so I'm not surprised to hear Honore tell that story, because they are very different men than the young college-age guys I met way back when.
Yeah. Honore, and I'm going to keep you muted. Sorry, Robert. There's just a weird audio hiss coming off. But Honore, same question to you. So Lyle calls you over and basically, again, in so many words, tells you, hey, bring it down a notch. I suppose you could have tried to kick his ass. You're a big guy. But you heeded his advice. How come?
Yeah, there was nothing about Lyle that reeked of that he was being condescending. There was nothing condescending about it. I was in 230 and he was in cell 232. So there was one neighbor in the middle of us. Mm. So, we saw each other every day. He's right there on the tier. That was probably our most in-depth conversation at the time, but we had exchanged pleasantries. We were hyper aware of who each other were. I'm going to the visiting room with beautiful women. He's in the visiting room. So you develop this awareness of each other, whether there's a friendship or not. And you can also develop a bit of a kinship. You can see the people you cannot relate to, and you can see the people you can relate to. The guys who are taking care of themselves physically, they're working out, the guys who, that got the shoes and the clothes, the guys who aren't, I guess a bit of like prison class warfare type of a thing. And so I think I viewed him as somebody who was put together in a way that I respected. And there was nothing condescending about the way he said that. I mean, I was in control. There was only one person that outranked me on that yard in terms of our structure and the organization that I belong to. And there was nobody going to just pop off and say something stupid to me. I didn't really have that experience. And I was like a baby rattlesnake. I didn't have a lot of discipline, so I would have been triggered. And that could have went the wrong way. He just did it in a way that just had to be appreciated. It came off as sincere concern. It didn't come off as judgment. It came off as, hey, you go on camera with those chains on and you embarrass the institution turns around and they're gonna, you can come under attack. You make them look bad. Take that stuff off. You do an interview, don't do an interview, don't put that on television that, you can walk around like that, where maybe somebody calls here and says, why does this guy get to do stuff other people can't do? He just kind of really, gave me some game is the way I took it. I didn't take it like he was stripping me of anything. I feel like he was giving me something. And throughout the course of our relationship, Lyle has maintained a big brother authority with me to this day. The only time I ever really forcefully assert myself with Lyle is if I'm concerned for him in some way, in preparation for the psych evaluation. I asserted myself in terms of making sure his preparation was up to par, making sure he was conscious of the traps. As someone who had done 2.5 psych evaluations, I know he had never done one. So I really wanted him to understand, hey, as smart and put together as we are, this is a real thing. And that's probably the most recent example in the decade of me ever kind of snapping at him like, he has his little brother, but yeah, Lyle is an authority figure in my life. He's my big brother. I trust him. I don't have I've never had a single sense that Lyle was attempting to use me or that we had an abusive relationship. And I think also the fact that his father operated within the music business may have had something to do with that. Here's a guy who's told me stories of walking in the house and finding a demo tape of Joshua Tree in the kitchen. Like it was just a regular, regular text, a regular tape cassette. And his freaking Joshua Tree, one of the greatest highest selling albums of all time. His father just has it in the kitchen on the counter. His father signed Too Short. His father signed Spice One, two iconic rappers from my region. So, people forget that Jose Menendez was really a music executive, not just some guy who was on the periphery of it. Menudo was one of the largest bands in the history of music. You got the Beatles and the Jackson 5, you got New Edition, you got Menudo. That's pretty significant right there. And so I think Lyle also viewed me from that place too, like, hey man, this guy's got some potential. And he's got that music executive thing in his blood, really. And I think he saw that in me too, that I had a shot. We saw what Tupac was and how that went. That had been news in our era. That was a very hot topic of conversation. And everybody was like, X gets out of here, he's the next Tupac. And there are a lot of people had high hopes for me. So I think Lyle just was inspired. And frankly speaking, I'm nominated. We got put up for Grammy consideration last year.
Wow.
25 years later, Lyle Menendez was right.
That's amazing. I was going to ask you, forgive my ignorance, but have you written about them in your songs?
I have. I wrote a song called Sins of the Father. Recently, just this year, I released that in January, I believe, around the time when they rescheduled the first resentencing hearing. The reason I did that, I got a lot of interview requests. Bob will mention me to people, but I've gotten a lot of interview requests, and I got concerned about the appearance of, using Lyle and Erik. I've never really made a thing out of them being my brothers publicly. Only when someone will ask me, hey man, I saw a picture of you and Lyle Menendez, like what the hell was that about? And then I'll explain it. Or if it comes up in a conversation, never me bringing it up in hip hop interviews and podcasts and things like that. But I told Lyle gave me a call and I'm like, hey bro, I'm concerned about doing these interviews or people thinking that, I'm just trying to get attention off of being, a guy that was around the yard with the Menendez brothers. And he's like, man, I need you to do every interview possible. I need you to, but there's nobody that knows our story the way you do from your perspective. We trust you and we need you to speak up. So I'm like, all right. I do a couple interviews. Think that was Newsweek, Extra. All of those happened after that conversation with Lyle. And I just felt like I wanted people to understand that I was my own man with my own thing. I record my music in a $20 million facility. I got a phenomenal recording contract. I'm signed to the biggest independent record label in the history of hip hop music. I ride shotgun with the biggest independent rap artists in the history of hip hop and Tech Nine. Music with Eminem, Kendrick Lamar, very respected, Tom Brady type hip hop wise, and I get to be his running back. And so I think it was important for people to know that I have my own capacity, my own capability, my own life. I didn't need attention as a result of my proximity to the Menendez brothers, that they are in fact my brothers, that I take care of Eric's daughter out here. You know, when she has a problem, she calls Uncle Honore. I'm the one who shows up for her or takes her out to eat.
I didn't know he had. How old's the daughter?
Oh man, yeah. You never tell a lady's age, but let's just say she'll be 25 for the rest of her life.
That's a good answer.
Yeah.
Honor, let me jump in here for a sec. So, by the way, this would not be happening if it wasn't for Robert, who is joining us. And Robert is, I'm a recovering journalist. I still, I guess, am in a way, but mainstream media. What has Robert's impact been on the possibility that Lyle and Eric see the light of day again? What kind of influence has he been?
Wow. I think it's top tier. I think it's number one on the list, in my humble opinion, when you think about the relationships that he was able to establish with members of the Menendez Anderson tribe, the uncovering of the letter that was written to Andy from the Roy, his involvement in that, and that resulting in all these different things, the habeas, all of that coming from there. Even that impacting the resentencing. I think Bob's got to be given a significant amount of credit for tipping the dominoes. Nobody gets more credit than Erik and Lyle. They changed their lives in a hopeless situation, authentically are who they are. They rehabilitated for the sake of their own comfort within their vessels. They wanted to, which is what they taught me as well. I had to be there for the rest of my life, then at least I could be comfortable with who I was as a human being and know that I was a good person for myself and my family. And so Lyle and Erik did that. And because of that, all of this work and the relentless pursuit of what he believed to be the truth and the accurate story, the real story, resulted in opportunities for the brothers to be freed and attention to be drawn to this case. And I don't think we'd be this far along if Bob hadn't done that.
Yeah, and Bob, I'm just curious, I don't want to put you on the spot because he's talking about you and speaking highly, but what does it feel like to know that something that you've been working on for, the better part of 35 years, the entire time they've been behind bars, might now have real repercussions and ramifications in terms of their freedom, potentially?
Well, as I said earlier, I was there for every day of each trial. And what happened in the second trial was a complete miscarriage of justice. The defense, which had put on 58 witnesses in the first trial that told a very detailed of life behind the walls of that mansion in Beverly Hills, they were only allowed to put on 25 witnesses in the second trial, and they were severely limited in what those witnesses could say. And so that's why I consider the murder verdict in the second trial was a miscarriage of justice. And then we had the penalty phase that followed the second trial, where jurors had to vote, had two choices, life without parole or the death penalty. And in the penalty phase, the defense was allowed to put on all the witnesses to tell the story of this family that was really dysfunctional and spinning wildly out of control. And at the end of that penalty phase, the jury voted for life without parole. And I spoke to several jurors off the record after the second trial, and they told me if they had heard the evidence of the family history in the guilt phase of the trial, they never would have voted for murder. So that's the problem. There's the miscarriage of justice.
Yeah. I've got so many questions. I hope Honore and Robert can stick around for a little bit longer. Jocelyn, thank you so much for this super sticker here. Really appreciate that. And yeah, I did not know Erik had a daughter. Lyle has no children. Who knew? But you learn something new every day. Honore, just you know, I will ask you this, you know, very openly. DA Nathan Hochman, who took over for this guy George Gascon, has been a pit bull about this, and he keeps repeating the phrase, the refrain, like it's a rap song. He keeps saying, "Look, the brothers have never shown remorse, never apologized." What do you make of that? Because from everything I've been told and I've heard and I've read, it's the exact opposite. His family says it's the exact opposite. I'm curious, did you ever hear them show remorse at the deaths, even though apparently they were severely abused? But have you personally heard remorse and apologies? Oh, let me get you. I got to get you unmuted. Hang on one second. There you go.
I think it does a disservice to pit bulls to say that Nathan Hochman is like one. I think that Hochman is delusional. Hochman is delusional and operating from a place of he has a narrative and he's holding on to it no matter what. He's the Titanic's going down and he's playing the violin and he's going all the way through, nose barely sticking out of the water, and he's sticking to it. He's sinking with the ship. Saying that Lyle and Erik haven't expressed remorse, I mean, there's hundreds of clips of them in a variety of interviews, most notably with Barbara Walters, and that's from the late 90s, saying that they were remorseful and had deep regret. And here you fast forward well into the 2010s, Lyle and Erik were expressing remorse. I've been in groups where, you know, you can't speak too specifically of your crime inside of a prison environment, but I've been in groups where Erik was expressing his understanding of remorse and regret in the meditation group for the sake of everyone else learning and having an understanding of it. And his understanding was, I'd say, in the 1 percentile. And that I went to board and I had a conservative Christian Republican commissioner named Commissioner Roberts, and I had Deputy Commissioner Karen Fleming. Commissioner Roberts said I gave him the best definition of remorse he'd heard in 30 years on the job. So if I can give the best definition of remorse, I can definitely tell you if I've heard a good one.
What is your definition of remorse?
I use the literal definition and an examination of that. You know, a gnawing sadness and a bitter regret arising from repentance for past misdeeds is the definition of remorse. And so I got into the specifics of that statement. Do you feel gnawing sadness and bitter regret arising? So it specifically has to arise from repentance for past misdeeds. And I went into, well, what does repentance mean? You have to understand what each of these words individually means to be able to know if you have that insight. And this is literally what we call insight, having an understanding of the underlying causes and the reasons that you did the things you did. It's not the what you did, it's the why you did. And Hochman keeps saying, because of their explanation of what they did, they have no insight. But insight is not what you did, it's your understanding of why you did. Gnawing sadness and bitter regret arising from repentance and past misdeeds is the literal definition of remorse. And if a person is capable of explaining that from that perspective, explaining their understanding of their life crime, the impact that they've had on the victim's family, which is the one thing I've heard Lyle and Erik both express the most, was the impact that they've had on their family. I've actually heard them say that. You've never gotten into Kitty and Jose, but have repeatedly, in my personal experience, heard them express regret and remorse for the experience of their family members and how their actions impacted their family. And So yeah, I just think it's crazy. Lyle's arrogant and cocky, and he tells me that I should humble myself and that there's a better way to do my time, and I don't got to be flashy. Lyle has no understanding of remorse, but Lyle and Erik are the ones who were a part of a group studying with me in preparation for board to understand remorse and in leadership positions in those groups. So I think Hochman's delusional and uninformed at best. He's completely uninformed and hasn't bothered to go take a look in their eyes as men. He has that open invitation to go to R.J. Donovan and do so. It's a very safe environment and a place conducive to the development of insight and understanding of life crimes. And he hasn't bothered to go down there and find out what this place is that they've been instrumental in establishing as a university of self-help that I graduated from.
By the way, I think that's a great point. I think if he is serious about this, maybe he should take the trip down to the San Diego area and visit with these guys. Larissa here, thank you so much. Just want to tell Robert Rand, I have followed his involvement in the case, and I respect his efforts so much. The Peacock doc was heartbreaking honest, and even Roy said to have that done by your own father is even worse. So you talked about Lyle. I just want to get into your meeting with Erik. Apparently, I guess you get transferred to a different prison where Erik is, and Lyle had given him the heads up that you were coming. What was that meeting like?
Yeah, I had, so this is years later, 6 years, 7 years later. I attended self-help groups, started doing anger management, started doing meetings with a psychologist every 2 weeks or so. Dr. Brianna Satterthwaite. I worked with her for a very long time, and she taught me so much. Once she figured out that I was actually interested in learning and that I was attempting to really striving and attempting to apply these concepts in my life, man, those people, there's a lot of them that just started really trying to feed me to find, I think any real teacher is inspired by a student that's doing well. And I think it was rewarding for a lot of those people that were sponsors and psychologists and a lot of them, the counselors, certain officers who just became advocates for me, champions who really wanted to see me finish blossoming into whatever that was. And so by the time I got to Erik, I was full steam ahead, and a couple things that happened that provided hope. Senate Bill 260 that came into effect later was the domino that tipped it was the SCOTUS ruling on Miller versus Alabama there in the early 2000s, somewhere around 4 or 5, I believe. We knew it was going through the courts as early as 2002, like right after my conversations with Lyle. But the argument was, does it violate the 8th Amendment right against cruel and unusual punishment for a juvenile to be sentenced to death and capital punishment, be that LWOP or a death sentence, a sentence of death? And the court ruled that it did violate the 8th Amendment protection against cruel and unusual punishment for a juvenile to be sentenced to death, and then argued that they also believed that a life sentence for a juvenile violated the 8th Amendment right against cruel and unusual punishment. They ruled on the death penalty, but didn't rule on the life. Shot over the bow for the states. The states are like, okay, the courts are going to get a case on this, and if they do, similar to gay marriage, similar to abortion, if the Supreme Court makes a ruling, that's the law in the United States of America. California has the largest prison system in practically the earth in the world, and we're going to have all these lifers, and what do we do with them? So that tipped the domino of them trying to figure out what became Senate Bill 260. So when I arrived on that facility with Erik, I was like, maybe I'm getting out of here. Like, maybe I can go home one day, maybe. And Erik came and found me. He had a letter from Lyle, and Lyle told him, hey, the ex is our little brother. I love him, so you gotta love him too. Treat him like I arrived. Take care of him. And he brought it and let me read it and said, that's that. And from there, he did the same thing Lyle had done. He said, hey, this is what we got to do. Erik had made significant inroads, and I think people don't comprehend how much influence the brothers had everywhere they've been. Initially, you can see in their RVRs, in their files that were released, where even some officers resented the amount of influence they had. And even though they were attempting to use that influence for good reasons, especially as hope increased throughout the California Department of Corrections, going from the CDC to the CDCR, with the R being rehabilitation being added in about 2005, right? So once that rehabilitation R got added to CDC, we saw a kind of beginning of a different environment in there, and a budding hope that started springing, where people thought, maybe we're motivated to stay out of trouble, start trying to go to school, do things a little different. So I get handed to Erik right when I'm in that space of hope. And so right to Narcotics Anonymous groups, anger management groups, right to it while Erik and I were together. And that's when I started having hope that, I could shrink my points, end up on a level 3 facility. I had never cared. You're a lifer, you have a point that, like that static risk assessment that they have with that 19 score. Mm-hmm. The point system, if your points are generally higher based on the severity of your crime. So you'll be level 4 maximum security, level 4 medium security, then you could go level 3 and level 2. And at the time they had a cap, no LWAPs were allowed to go to level 2s. So I knew if I make it to a level 3, my opportunities for vocation, for college courses, things like that would increase because those environments have even more going on than the level 4. So that was my goal while I was with Erik. And so I ended up transferring from that facility, took a bit of a journey for a while, same thing, education, doing what I got to do. I went to High Desert State Prison, where I was able to do 4 or 5 years there, and I shrank my points so far that I made it to level 3. When I made it to level 3, I got transferred to R.J. Donovan Correctional Facility, and when I got there, Erik was waiting for me again, literally at the gate waiting for me. So I'm walking up with my cart with my stuff in it, and Erik's at the gate like, all right, it's time to get to work. What had happened in that period of time was that I left him in 2010, and in 2012, Governor Brown, Senator Lonnie Hancock authored what we know now as the Youthful Offender Law. Mm-hmm. And in January of 2013, Governor Jerry Brown signed that into law. And overnight, I became like the top dog on this guy's going home. It was like, hey, man, you're getting out of here. And, I called my lawyer, and he's like, yeah, this is real. And I'll have you out in 3 years. Took him 5. But I transferred to Erik, and he was like, yeah, man, it's time to go to work. It's time to get busy. And so I'm immediately in the Life Care and Hospice program, which he created. And it's funny where they talk about Life Care and Hospice as if it's something that Erik championed. Erik wrote the Life Care and Hospice program, wrote it, submitted that to the warden for approval, submitted it to the Secretary of Corrections, got that signed off on, founded it, and then went and led that program, and ultimately now has that spreading out through the rest of the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. So he's not a champion of Life Care and Hospice. He's literally he conceptualized and brought that and manifested that from his spirit out of his brain and into our reality. And I ended up being a participant of that group and received the certificates and everything that came with it. He also put me in his meditation group that he founded, and I went to anger management there, Alternatives to Violence Project, Criminal and Gang Members Anonymous to address lifestyle addictions. I mean, I'm literally in a college campus of self-help, and literal college campus as well for people pursuing AAs and BAs. So I joined the POOCH program, which is an acronym for Prisoners Overcoming Obstacles, Creating Hope, which was established by the Tender Loving Canines Assistance Dogs program, where they train assistance dogs for wounded warriors and autistic children. So I joined that group, and because I joined it, I got transferred to Echo Yard, and Erik remained on Bravo Yard. I got transferred to Delta Yard first and ended up on Echo Yard with the dog program. So that Erik and I were briefly separated. Then they changed the rules saying that LWOPs couldn't be on a level 2 facility, and Erik automatically qualified because he had the lowest possible point score for any inmate. And so Erik transferred over to where I was on Echo facility. So now I'm waiting for Erik this time. And I'm like, all right, Erik, it's time to get busy. Yeah, the little brother becomes the guy with the influence. I'm like, let's go. And so me and Erik together, man, we started kicking butt over there and establishing a lot of programs. The American Sign Language programs. We noticed that the ADA population didn't have representation inside of the self-help groups. So we got American Sign Language in there so that those guys could participate as well. Erik really did a lot for the ADA program, the community, any guys that had issues like that. And then, Lyle shows up April of 2018. And so now all three of us are reunited. Those two initially, Erik went out there and got Lyle and escorted him back to the facility first. They went to the program office briefly, but they were under observation. And so I had a room that I was building into a podcast studio inspired by Ear Hustle at San Quentin State Prison. They have a podcast. And so I got the administration to agree to do a podcast. And lo and behold, all those years I smuggled recording equipment into prisons, the facility had approved my music program. So I went from smuggling and getting in trouble for smuggling studio equipment into a facility to being given permission to build a recording studio for people who were willing to stay out of trouble, to incentivize the population. Talk about coming full circle. So me, Lyle, and Erik all end up together. They have their first private meeting in my podcast room. So I'm like, I'm going to leave you guys to it. And they were like, sit down. So I'm like, all right. So I sit there, I keep people from coming in the room and things like that. And they had their initial meeting, man. They, hugged each other and just, they missed each other and told each other they missed each other. 22 years it had been. And I sat there, still a tough guy, I don't want to cry. So I sit there and let them do their thing. I get up, I get a couple hugs, and we went in and got busy, man, transformed that environment into what it is now.
Wow. Did I hear you correctly? You said you had a podcast in prisons. I know Suge Knight has one, and I'm jealous because he has more followers than me. Did you have one?
Yeah. So what I did, Suge Knight is doing his thing the way he's doing his thing. I was building something specifically for the facility, not for me as an individual.
Got it.
And, at that point, I knew I was going home. It wasn't necessary for me to build something that I could be doing like that because I was going to get out and go to a recording facility immediately. And so I wasn't worried about myself more so than trying to establish something. I was worried about myself. That kid that got in all that trouble and wore those big chains and diamonds? Like if that guy showed up somewhere that had that kind of program going and had somebody like me, Lyle, and Erik involved, that kid would have stayed out of a lot of trouble to be able to record music. You know what I mean? I would have been motivated to really skip a lot of negative experiences I had and had a bit of hope, and I'd have been incentivized and positively reinforced. And so I think, I can't time travel and do it for young me. So the way I do it now is I set up something that I know that I would have benefited from for the next kid that comes through and has an opportunity to do things a little bit better than I did in the beginning. And so, that was what I was motivated for. That's what I was motivated by.
Yeah, this is a beautiful story. Can't take up all these guys' time. So I have another question for Robert, and then with Honore's permission, I'm gonna do like a rapid fire because I've been writing down questions and ask him a question to see if we can get an answer, and then move on to the next one because I could sit here and I know that I'm gonna get Honore back on with Bob as this case develops, and we'll continue to follow this case. But again, huge thanks to Robert for setting this up, and big thanks to Honore for coming on and sharing this unbelievable story. I'm going to go on a 2-second rant, which is the following. I am caught up in the crossfire of this Karen Reed trial in Canton, Massachusetts. Got the COE here, Honore. It stands for the Chief of Everything. My wife, she's our executive producer, and she's going to yell at me for this. But, you know, I got bloggers, people who are tweeting at me, telling me, oh, you're not a real true crime guy because I'm not covering the Karen Reed case. That is the most toxic, horrible, divisive case in the world. And then you come to STS and look at this. We're bringing people together. You've got a guy who was serving a life sentence who's now trying to help the Menendez brothers. Menendez brothers helped them. Robert Rand, is this the real true crime story here? Not the Karen Reed crap.
Well, the Menendez story has been around for 35 years. And if you had told me 35 years ago that 35 years in the future, you'll still be covering this case, and you will also find new evidence that will impact this case, I would have laughed. But yet, here we are.
Yeah, it's unreal. So, Honore, you cool if I ask you some questions, and we'll get some quick answers, and then we'll get some final thoughts here. So, musical inspiration. Who inspired you musically? Who does still?
The person who inspired me musically as a kid, the first two guys would be Ice-T and Ice Cube, the ISIS, the two ISIS of the West Coast. I love Ice-T as a man and as a rapper. I'm blessed that, you know, he'll take time out of his very busy schedule to, you know, acknowledge me and speak to me. You know, what a success story for a guy to have come from what he came from, and to have been a participant in this culture in an authentic way for the entirety of my life and my awareness of hip hop. And so I just love Ice-T, his wife, his child, his children, you know, everything that he stands for. Ice Cube as a rapper taught me, you know, my political leanings, the understanding of what we call street knowledge, to start making me have a question, even gang banging versus, you know, attempting to be an example as a Black man instead of being someone that would tear down my own community. A lot of that influence from Ice Cube. Too Short, the entrepreneurial aspect of making hip hop. You know, Too Short was the first artist of any stature to follow me when I was released from prison, and got to hang out with him Super Bowl weekend. And man, he's just always been really gracious and respectful. He taught us so much through his music, and you know, they say don't meet your heroes. And when I met Too Short, you know, he was Too Short, and that was pretty cool for somebody who, you know, since I was 11 years old, I've been listening to his music, and didn't get a chance to meet him until I was, you know, a grown man. And man, he was who I thought he was and who I hoped he was. And then Scarface was kind of like the spiritual guru for even a kid that wanted to be a thug and a gangster. You know, Scarface spoke to my spirit. Songs like Never Seen a Man Die, Never Seen a Man Cry, Smile, which he recorded with my other guy who would be Tupac. You know, Tupac had a vulnerability and a sense of political awareness and almost a melancholy little aspect to him.
Yeah.
That made me understand that there was an honesty necessary to have, and as a component, as a writer in hip hop music, that it was possible to be a poet and a rapper, quote unquote, that you could wear both those hats, and that it was the art was embedded in that, being able to tell real stories that move people. Brenda's Got a Baby, Dear Mama, had to be able to communicate something meaningful like that. Did wonders for me as an artist. And Then you got guys like Rakim, who I was blessed to do that song with, that was up for Grammy consideration. You know, to have Rakim as one of the most technically proficient rappers in the history of hip hop, be someone who cared about little old me and, you know, thought I should be on one of his songs that he produced. That was pretty significant. And then LL Cool J. You know, LL Cool J was the first rapper that made me fall in love with hip hop. You know, he was younger than Ice-T. He was young enough where I saw him as like a big brother almost. Ice-T's been an authority figure my whole life. I always viewed Ice Cube as the big homie. I always viewed Scarface as the big homie. I viewed Rakim as the big homie. And I viewed LL almost like a big brother. So for LL to have been so gracious to me and respectful, for me to have been such a huge fan the entirety of my life. The first rap album I ever purchased with my own money was Bigger and Deffer. And I walked all the way down Florin Road just to get a pack of kids, you know, like we were like a new movie was coming out, you know, and purchased Bigger and Deffer and listened to it for 6 months, learned every word of it. So to have LL show me respect as an MC and allow me to be, you know, on this platform, rock the bells. They've been very good to me. If I do something worthy, they were the first hip hop platform to really go in depth on the Menendez story and not view it as some carnival ride thing. They really did a story about it and my experience with them and why it mattered. And that's a real hip hop publication. And hip hop can be toxic, toxic masculinity. These are tough subjects. And for LL Cool J's platform, Rock the Bells, to have tackled that was something that I thought was extremely honorable and consistent with who I think he is as a leader. So yeah, LL will kind of round that up for me, man. Those are my guys.
Yeah. Robert, I'm just wondering, what do you think the reaction would be if a guy like Honore reached out to DA Nathan Hochman and he tells the DA, hey, I was, you know, in prison with these guys and it's time for them to be let out? What kind of impact do you think that would have?
I believe that would have a huge impact, and I hope that Honore testifies in some of the resentencing hearings coming up, because he has been right where the brothers are, and he has gone through the process, and he has arrived at the other side, and he is just a remarkable man. And he is, as I've said earlier, Honore, Erik, and Lyle Menendez are the poster guys for rehabilitation in prison.
Yeah, they really are. All right, so Honore, how about one sentence or less answers to the following question? Are Lyle and Erik hip hop fans?
They are.
There you go. I grew up loving Run DMC, the Beasties, all those guys. I'm jealous because I just checked you out on Insta and Nate Diaz follows you. Are you friends with the Diaz brothers?
I am friends with the Diaz brothers, and it's a lot of those guys that show me a lot of love. Couple Sacramento boys, the Stockton boys, but yeah, the Diaz brothers are huge X-Rated fans, turns out, and I got a ton of respect for them. They've been anytime open doors. The Max Payne, you know, all those guys, they've shown me a lot of love.
Yeah, Robert has no idea what we're talking about. UFC fighters, Rob. I'm a big fight fan. Shout out to Don't Be Scared, homie.
Actually, I'm a major hip hop fan, which is
Are you really?
Crazy for a middle-aged white guy who went to an Ivy League school. But I also listen to Run DMC, you know, Kool Moe Dee, all the people that were appearing on Arsenio back in the day.
Yeah. I knew Robert was cool, man. I just didn't realize how cool Robert is. Is it true, Honore, that you speak to the Menendez brothers every day or almost every day?
No, I wouldn't say every day, especially right now with everything they got going on. It's been consistent. I say since the resentencing thing started up, it's about every 2 weeks or so. I communicate with them on the tablet if it takes a little bit too long for me to hear from one of them. I'll jump in there and leave them a couple of messages. They'll let me know they're okay. And they'll give me a call when, something's going on or anything like that. But right now, I remember when I was in their circumstances, it was important for me to just stay focused on what I was focused on. A lot of tugging on you for your attention. So I like to pop up and just say, hey, man, I'm right here. All is well. The kids are doing well. They'll pop back up. Hey, man, I got to give you a call. And then, I got them, when that number from the institution shows up, it's automatic. So, yeah. And shout out to Josh Emmett from Sacramento, UFC fighter. That's my boy. That's my guy right there. Sacramento guy, Sacramento pride. Josh Emmett.
He's a bad fighter. Him and Uriah Faber, they built up a lot of great fighters out of Sacramento. And I love the fact that Robert is a hip hop fan. Who knew? I love it. So people are asking what if they're going to listen to their first X-rated song. What is it? What do they listen to?
I'd say because of the topic at hand, I'd say listen to Sins of the Father, which is my interpretation of the experience of the Menendez brothers from beginning to moment of the crime. I tell the story from Lyle Menendez's perspective as the older brother. And I walk a person through the experience from childhood, from the abuse to the ultimate decision to take the lives of their parents. And I tried to do it in as beautiful and eloquent of a way that would honor the brothers. And I think we pulled that off. So Sins of the Father by X-R-A-I-D-E-D, X-rated. I think that's a significant introduction to me as a writer and a producer.
We're going to check it out. What do you say? This might be longer than one sentence, but is a 20-year-old black kid, Hispanic kid, white kid, pick your choice, sitting behind bars in the state of California or anywhere else right now, accused of, murder, who's thinks that they're going to be in there for life. What is your advice to that person?
My advice to that person is to educate themselves. That education is the accumulation of information is the superpower. To be able to retain it. It gives you all kind of opportunities. Being able to comprehend, reading and comprehension, speaking, everything that comes with the mastery of the English language as much as you can. The life-changing results of doing so are so significant. And so, if they say in the beginning was the word, I think words are pretty important. And so I tell people, hey, man, learn as much as you can through every means that will be documented, and make sure that they're documenting these things in your file, because even if you don't have hope, sometimes hope has you. So I would tell them to be ready for an opportunity, man. But it's a good blessings are what happens when preparedness meets opportunity, man. Be ready for something good to happen.
That's awesome. I love that quote. What is something that we don't know all these years later about Lyle and Erik? Is there something that we don't know?
Wow. Something that no one knows yet. Wow.
It's got to be something. I don't know. Maybe they, I don't know, like
everybody knows about pickleball, handball.
Those guys were amazing tennis players, by the way. Unreal.
Yeah. Everybody knows about Erik and his paintings.
I don't know, like maybe they're jelly bean addicts or something. I have no idea. Something. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know, man. They're movie buffs. They love movies and TV shows. I don't know if people know that. Like movie nights were a big deal in the joint. If they had a good movie, or like they let us binge Game of Thrones, man. Everybody loved that. I don't know, man. That's what I would say, that people might not know. They're big time movie buffs. They love movies and TV shows.
Two more super quick ones. For you, what's the biggest difference from when you were that cocky young guy accused of murder, in the joint, to today? What's the single biggest difference?
Love, man. I got so much love in my life. You know, the existence of my two kids, I got two sons that weren't supposed to exist. You know, I was never supposed to be free. These guys were never supposed to exist, but men plan and God laughs, they say. And you know, I have these children, and even empathizing with Lyle and Eric, you know, I look at my sons and to process what they experienced, the inability to even fathom it as a father. Such pride, man, for me to wake up in the morning today and my door cracks a little bit and this little guy runs in there, Dad, Dad. And he runs in that room and jumps up in the bed with me, you know, and just sticks his head in my chest and lays there for a good 5 minutes. Man, yeah, man, I don't know, bro. Man, yeah,
Hey,
yeah,
well,
being a dad, man.
I became a dad late in life, man, and I'm sort of. I mean, it's sad because I'm older, but I love it because I was at T-ball today, and my kid hit a second triple of the week, man. And you cannot beat that feeling. So,
Yeah.
and by the way, my daughter claims she's taken Simone Biles' spot at the 2028 Olympics. So, watch out, Biles, watch out, because my
Yeah,
daughter's
who's
coming.
gonna tell her she's wrong? Let's go.
I'm not, man. And then you'll be writing a
Yeah.
song about my daughter. No pressure, maybe a little pressure. Robert Rand, I just want to give you a final say and then one last question for Honore. But thank you, Robert. This would not happen without you. By the way, no pressure on Robert, but he did tell me he's going to get me my old tennis partners from the East Brunswick Racket Club, Lyle and Eric, on the show at some point. We will do that for sure. But Robert, your final words tonight, your thoughts.
First of all, I want to thank all the people who messaged into the show and told me that they had read my book and they followed the Menendez Murders documentary, and they've been following the case. And I appreciate all of the supporters. For people that do not believe Erik and Lyle, I urge them to read my book, The Menendez Murders. And the last thing I'd like to say is that these are not cartoon characters. The people that were being made fun of in the 1990s on Saturday Night Live, these are real people. And now they are 57 and 54 years old, and they are going to do great work when they are released from prison, which I believe eventually they will be.
I agree with you. I think it's going to happen. I lied. Two quick questions. So, Honore, I heard a former inmate say this to me not that long ago, and it really stuck with me. He said, you know, there's so many people who are basically incarcerated in their minds. They walk around, they're miserable, they're not happy people. They don't, you know, I was just talking to a woman who was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And she told me when she wakes up now, it's a totally different world for her. She was a lawyer, but now she appreciates the sunset. She appreciates the sunrise. I know it sounds cliche, but what is your advice about true freedom? And why are so many people kind of miserable human beings stuck in whatever horrible spin cycle they're in? What is freedom to you?
I think the human brain is the worst prison ever made.
Yeah.
And I think the first prison that all people have to parole from is their own brain. I believe that rumination is the leading cause of depression and mental illness. And we have a lot of people who ruminate, and ruminating is almost like the person who clanks the cup across the bars. You know, that's the clanking of the cup in that prison in their brain, ruminating. I think that defeating your mind, and this is something Eric helped me with in that meditation class, you know, beyond mindfulness, things of that nature. Reading that book was important. Doing visualization, meditation tactics to calm that noise in there, to calm the desire to reimagine events and repeat and relive, to just give the brain a different place to be when in stasis. I would just tell people that if they have the courage to defeat their own fear of their personal judgments, childhood traumas, the narratives that were spun and scripted early on by authority figures who just didn't understand or maybe just weren't good people. That we don't have to believe these narratives. We don't have to believe everything we think. We don't have to believe everything we feel. A human being is unlimitedly capable of feeling a real thing based on a false stimulation. That's why we like roller coasters and horror movies. We can feel real emotions based on fake events. Very important for a human to defeat fear and just be willing to forge forward. And that bravery will result in an opportunity to have a wonderful experience in life. It'll open all the doors, but until that happens, it's all bad. And that's from a guy who had to do it.
Yeah, that's amazing, and I'm guilty of that rumination. It also makes me think. I've got a buddy. I won't say Steve's last name, but he went to Harvard and he went to Princeton, and there's different types of genius, and I don't think that he would be necessarily capable, and it's no put down to him, but you learn a lot of things from a lot of different. I might learn about science from him, but I'm going to learn a hell of a lot more about life from a guy who's lived it, like Honore. The final question: when the Menendez brothers are freed here, Honore, and the three of you are reunited outside those bars, those steel bars, what are you guys doing your first night of freedom? The three of you together.
Knowing us, it's food. Knowing us, it's food. And one thing that we're all capable of that I really enjoy, we're capable of being in the same room and just feeling each other there. You know, the presence. You can feel each other's presence and enjoy that silence and just existing, right? Being in the same room and existing, I think, or in the same space, be that at the beach, wherever it may be, that place of freedom to just be in silence with them for a minute there and just breathe. And, we'll just look at each other. It'll say everything to just exist together is what I would like to do. We kind of just stand and just look at them, and kind of just give them a nod and allow ourselves to just feel that freedom, that moment, rather. Just feel the moment. I think that'll be one of my favorite moments of the whole experience, is to being able to just, that first time, get to walk up and just feel the moment, not even have a lot to say.
This is one of those shows, might be my favorite one. Huge thanks again to Robert Rand for setting this up with Honore, and I'm hoping very soon we're going to do a show with Robert, Honore, and we'll get Lyle and Erik on too, and I won't even have to say anything. We're just going to let them talk the whole night, and it'll be an amazing show watching those guys reunite. So I feel like I made a new friend with Honore. I'm going to check out your music. Love you, America. Love you, Sacramento. Love you, Los Angeles. Love you, Jersey, where I'm from originally. And I don't know. We're going to see Lyle and Erik free one of these days. I think they've done their time at this point. Some of the hate mail will come. They did kill their parents, but, there's a thing called redemption in this world. So thank you all, and we will all stay in close touch. We're back tomorrow. Donna Adelson's in court, and we'll be covering that hearing live. Honore, it was an honor to have you, and Robert, thank you.
As always.
All right, gentlemen. We'll see you guys tomorrow night. Love you.